started writing Food for the Archons as a book of despair after watching my father die in 2013. During his transition, I experienced a series of paranormal and psychic events that left me feeling that I had either gone completely crazy or fell into humanity's darkest secret. I spent the next 5 years conducting extensive research, and I quickly learned that what I had experienced was real. My journey brought me to an understanding that showed me that despite the terrifying reality of an unseen predator, we as humans have a forgotten power. Just knowing this brings us tremendous hope in what once seemed a dark reality. I wrote this book for me in hopes of gaining a better understanding of our reality and relationship to it. But my hope is that you will find as much value in reading it as I did in writing it. I Am Human, Food for the Archons, humanity's psychic connections, simulated realities, parallel worlds, and the manipulation of mankind. It's available on Amazon.com and at sixcentsmedia.net and wherever books are sold. I'm Dennis Nappi II, reminding you to let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
I got hit with some inspiration not too long ago watching a popular movie on Netflix starring Ryan Reynolds called The Atom Project. And it got me thinking, it got me having one of those moments where I start making all these connections, tying into a bunch of things that I've been exploring for quite some time, looking at things like time travel, remote viewing, projecting our consciousness. And it got me connecting things like the Nag Hammadi library, looking at the Gnostic texts and aeons and alternate realities. It's all spinning through my mind, and I'm seeing these connections that I want to get out in a discussion with all of you and looking at our greater purpose here and what these abilities, what these realities might mean for us and why they might be possible. It might be all one giant learning machine. How did I come to that conclusion? I'm going to take a deep dive into the Gnostic texts and tie it into some pop culture with The Atom Project, starring Ryan Reynolds. Hi, Truth Seekers. Dennis Nappi II here. I'm excited to be with all of you. So much going on over at Six Sense Media and now Six Sense Reiki. Quick commercial. I have a couple plugs for you right here. I promise it's going to be fast. But first and foremost, this turned out way better than I thought. For those watching on YouTube, the Seeker Dream Journal, I'm holding it right here. This is the hardcover. It's also available in paperback. But the quality of this book, I mean, just seeing my logo here on this journal here, I have two versions of it out right now. One is just strictly blank inside. The other one, I created a bullet journal style because I use bullet journals all the time. But it's beautiful here on the back. It's got my saying, let your intuition be your guide. And it's labeled on the side, the Secret Dream Journal. And I have another one inspired by the Hive that will be dropping very shortly that I think it's a beautiful cover with some artwork that I have on it as well. But just carrying this around, journaling, I say all the time, is such an important part of this spiritual journey. And I podcast as a part of that. I make my own recordings. I write stories, but journaling has been the thread through it all. It has helped me to, number one, you know how quickly you lose a dream sometimes, right? So it's helped me record and experience a thought, an impression, an encounter. I have probably 2 decades worth of journals that I've been keeping since I was a child. And then it's a great analytical tool as you're going back, as you're making these connections and you go back and you find something because the journal captures your experience in that moment, your thoughts in that moment. And that's significant. I think it's important to keep a journal, and I've been wanting to create these for a long time, something that I think for me with this symbol, the charge of this symbol and the meaning of it and the value that goes within the pages between these covers here. It's just, I think it's profound. So I'm excited about this. And if you want to support the show, sixcentsmedia.net/books. Today's September 12th. I will say I'm updating the journals page, but that's, neither here nor there. You can find it on Amazon. but click on the journal that you're interested in, and you can get yourself a copy. I love it. I'm proud of it. It's fantastic. All right, next commercial, and I'm done. We're gonna get on to this deep stuff that I teach you guys with in the beginning. My Reiki One course via Zoom. That starts, like I said, today's September 12th. This podcast should be dropping in the next 3 days or so. October 1st. I still have a few seats open. There's still time to register. If you enter the discount code Seeker, Seiker, you'll receive 15% off as well into the class. It's a 6-week course starting October 1st, meeting Tuesday evenings at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you're going to get your Reiki attunement, and we're going to have great discussions looking at the history of Reiki, looking at intuitive abilities. You're going to learn how to do Reiki on yourself, perform healing on yourself. We're going to talk about meditation, how to improve your meditation, and ultimately how to give a Reiki treatment to someone else, how to process that information. It's a great course. I'm excited about the first cohort, so I hope you'll join me. Last thing I'll say about Reiki is it's really been such a great foundational structure for me in helping me to explore my own intuitive abilities, and then to be able to use that to help other people in need, whether it's been spiritual pain, emotional pain, physical pain. I've even supported people through hospice, and it's been just very rewarding being able to offer this gift of Reiki to people. So I hope you'll join me. Check it out, sixthsensemedia.net/Reiki. Okay, I'm sorry. I hate doing all these commercials. I know we have the books in the beginning, but got to get it out of there because I think it's important. I think it brings all of you value. Let's talk about this. I was watching The Atom Project. I'm probably going to have some spoilers here. If you haven't seen the movie, pause this podcast, go watch The Atom Project, and then come back and listen to it. Stars Ryan Reynolds. I think he's a great actor. Huge fan of his work. The premise of this movie is Ryan Reynolds' character ends up, he's involved in time travel, and he goes back in time and he encounters his 12-year-old self. And it goes through the journey of why he's back in time. I won't give that much of a spoiler, but obviously there's a protagonist and an antagonist. There's a bad guy, and they're messing with space time. They're messing with timelines. You're not supposed to change the past, and these things are happening. But the whole time, Ryan Reynolds, the adult Ryan Reynolds, is interacting with his 12-year-old self. Maybe this is why it resonates with me, because the father died. And so the older self, in the 12-year-old's timeline, dad had just died. In the 30 or 40 something year old's timeline, he was 44, which is pretty much my age. Um, he's dealing with the residual effects of losing his father as a small child. And he keeps having these dialogues with his younger self. And, it's hysterical, just listening to them go back and forth. But it's really thought-provoking because at the end, they both grow from the experience. And here's the kicker. They have these dialogues. They start seeing things in a new perspective. And then there's growth. And then the way that they work it out is as they're going back to their original timelines, the two of them fade away. They leave the timeline that they were in and they fade back into their own space-time, their own reality. And it reminds me of the Gnostic texts that I wrote about in Food for the Archons. It was one of those moments where it just came like screaming at me. I had to stop. I had to write stuff down about it. I had to journal about it, just so I didn't forget it, because this is about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it's been eating at me ever since until I get a chance to sit down and do this podcast. I'm reminded of the Book of Zostrianos. I've talked about this several times. I wrote about it, but it's relevant, and I think it's something for me that I'm still processing and unpacking. And one of the things that when I read these types of things now, the same thing if you watched our Reiki project looking at Dr. Usui, Zostrianos, Dr. Usui, many of you out there, we're truth seekers. That's what this is all about, right? We get this feeling, this urge, this desire, this need to know something. And the last podcast, I really got into talking about what that experience is like. If you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to go back and listen to last month's podcast, just talking about that question, that download that drives us. And when I read about Zostrianos, I mean, the book I'm going to read from the Nag Hammadi Library tonight, just a little bit. The Nag Hammadi Library was found in the 1940s in some clay jars as scrolls buried in near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, buried over 2,000 years ago. So I'm not saying that's when it was written. That's when the Gnostics buried these scrolls to preserve them because a lot of this information was being changed, it was being destroyed, it was being lost. And when you study the Nag Hammadi text, and I'm by no means an expert, but I did spend a lot of time going through select chapters. If you search through my YouTube channel, through some stuff, I think there's a playlist on the main page called Daily Gnosis. At one point, when I was writing Food for the Archons, I was really trying to understand the Gnostics and Gnosticism, which means knowledge. And I dissected a lot of these. I spent a lot of time going through this stuff. The Book of Zostrianos moved me because he's a fellow truth seeker. It normalizes this process. He has these very surreal experiences. But when I read this, then I come back and I think about my journaling experiences. And I think about what happened to Zostrianos and the knowledge he obtained. And I think about the stories that I get through my meditations and my spiritual experiences and the conversations I have with some of you out there who reach out to me. These stories that come from the Bible, these stories that come from things like the Nag Hammadi, I don't think they've ever stopped. I think these encounters and experiences are part of the human condition. They're part of our evolution. They're part of our growth. We've just stopped talking about them. We've demonized them. We've downplayed them. We've denied them. But if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably someone who goes, yeah, but I've had the experience. It validates our experiences. I don't think it's any different than what happened in the Bible or in these books or in any work. Of course, over time, I think some of the stories get changed and the actual facts get embellished over time. But here's why. Let me read this here. So I'm in the Nag Hammadi Library. This is the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, the revised and updated translation of sacred Gnostic texts, complete in one volume. This one's edited by Marvin Meyer. Advisory board was Wolf Peter Funk, Paul Hubert Purier, and James N. Robinson. And the introduction was by Elaine H. Pagels or Pagels. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. And I'm looking in the Book of Zostrianos on page 547. Now, the way this is translated, there are portions. I don't know if I'm going to cover any of those portions, but they'll be reading the text and then they'll put like dot 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 because they either the scrolls were damaged or they just couldn't decipher what it was trying to say. This isn't the beginning of this book, but I'm going to read this one section here, and it's titled Diligent but Fruitless Attempts to Find Answers. How many of us, just that heading alone, have had diligent but fruitless attempts to find answers? How many of us have spent hours going down a rabbit hole, whether it be YouTube or back in the old days, whether it be going to the library, reading these books, having these experiences, sometimes just going out, and I've done this, going out in the woods by myself, sitting there at midnight, waiting for an experience. And, as Whitley Strieber did this in his book, or talked about this in his books, sitting with that fear, right? So here it's this diligent but fruitless attempts to find answers, meaning he didn't find the answers. Do you remember what those feelings are like when you just want to know and the answer just keeps dancing away from you? You can't quite figure it out. So I want to put ourselves in that mindset here. Okay. So, and it reads, seeking to understand these things, after the custom of my kind, I would offer them up daily to the God of my fathers. I would praise them all, since my forefathers and ancestors who sought found. And I equate that to me, the God of my fathers being Catholic growing up, praying for information and for answers and not getting it. And he writes, as for me, I did not stop seeking a place of rest worthy of my spirit, where I would not be bound in the perceptible world. Okay. A place of rest worthy of my spirit, not bound in the perceptible world, in physical reality, somewhere his spirit can go out and explore, right? Then, as I was deeply troubled and gloomy because of the feeble mindedness that surrounded me, I dared to act and to deliver myself to the wild beasts of the desert for a violent death. He's given up. He's trying to find spiritual enlightenment, just like when I talked about Dr. Usui. And Dr. Usui, with Reiki, was going to perform a meditation on Mount Karama where he said, I am willing to die in search of this spiritual enlightenment. And that's why he was fasting for 21 days until Reiki energy came to him. Much like Zostrianos, I'm going out into the wilderness and I'm going to deliver myself to the wild beasts for a violent death because I can't find the answers, and the feeble-minded people around me just don't get it. They just can't provide me with what I believe is out there. So the next section is called The Worldly Appearance of the Angel of Knowledge. And it reads, There stood before me the angel of knowledge of eternal light. And he said to me, Zostrianos, why have you gone mad as though you were ignorant of the great eternal beings who are above? Don't you know that you are a chosen person, and therefore you were informed about what you are to do, so that you might now be saved? Never ever become destructive, nor pay attention to those you are familiar with, in order to save others whom the Father on high will choose. All right, let's pause that. He's having some kind of spiritual experience with a light being, or maybe just pure consciousness. It just calls, the angel of knowledge is of eternal light. And it's saying, he's like, listen, dude, you know that you're chosen. You know better that there's something out there. Why are you trying to hurt yourself? Is basically what he's saying to him. Here's what's interesting. Never become destructive, nor pay attention to those you're familiar with in order to save others. I've said this before on my show. We need to stop trying to wake people up. It's not our job. If people need to be awakened, they will find you. If people need the information you have, they will seek you out. Think about the stress and the negative energy and the state that puts you in when you're trying to wake somebody up. I'll put that in quotes, wake somebody up. I don't like that term, but I feel that when we're trying to wake people up, I feel it's no different than when I was confronted in my early 20s by a born again Christian, a member of the born again, Christian church who just wanted me to open my heart to Jesus because he was trying to save me. Saving me indicates that because of my current position, I'm in some kind of danger. Waking someone up denotes to them that they are somehow asleep and ignorant. People don't like to hear that. But moreover, being slapped with the truth is traumatic. And if you're not like Morpheus says in The Matrix, we don't free a mind after a certain age because it has trouble letting go. If the mind isn't seeking it out, if you're not choosing to take the red pill, let's use our Matrix analogies here, it's dangerous for the mind. Let the mind seek you out. Let the person seek you out. And I believe that's what they're talking about here in this text here. So I'm going to skip ahead. What this part talks about, it goes through the next couple of pages. The angel of knowledge takes Zostrianos up in a basically says he leaves his body. Let's see all right, let me read this next part because this is interesting. It's an out-of-body experience. Zostrianos' spiritual ascent through the aeons, the luminous cloud. When he had said this to me, I very eagerly and gladly embarked with him upon a great luminous cloud and left my molded bodily form upon the earth. So this sounds to me like he's having an out-of-body experience. If he's leaving his physical body, his molded bodily form upon the earth, guarded by glories. Well, what's a glory? It describes a glory as Jesus's ascension on a cloud or Nephil's rescue of Pyrrhus from Eno's plot to sacrifice him. This doesn't really go into, here we go, certain glories or spiritual helpers will protect Zostrianos' physical body from tampering until he descends and reassumes it as the vehicle for his mission to proclaim what he has learned to the rest of the elect. Now, I'm going to be contradictory here because it goes in and then comes back and says, you're going to teach people, right? I'll get to that though. Um, he had an out-of-body experience 2,000 years ago. That experience, at least 2,000 years ago, that's when it was buried. The experience is being talked about. We know this is a real thing thanks to the work of Bob Monroe, really, and the research that he's done through the Monroe Institute and then many others that have followed in his footsteps. So he's talking about going on this luminous cloud, and they take him through different levels of reality. So he's exploring all these different realms, all these planetary realms, and they talk a lot about aeons. Now, aeon is a long period of time. But an aeon also operates like a system of reality that also has like a consciousness of its own. These aeons serve different purposes and different functions. And he talks about these different functions, throughout this text here. But this is what has always stuck with me. And you've heard me talk about this on the show, but I really want to bring this piece home. This section, this is on page 551. The Aeonic copies and the illumination of souls. So think of an aeon as a reality. Let's use a metaphor. Think of an aeon as like a VR, right? And then you have this Aeonic copy, which is a replica of your physical reality. So I've got my physical reality, and then I can go on, put my VR headset on, and be in this virtual reality, but it's fully immersive, and it feels like the real world, but it's this other world. Like I can go into there and I can burn my house down in virtual reality, take the headset off, and my house is still standing here. So let's read about this. Now the Aeonic copies exist as follows. They have not attained an equipotent, meaning equally potent form, but they possess eternal glories, and they exist as judgment seats for each of the powers. So we talked about glories earlier. There are these guardians, right? Eternal glories or guardians within them. But when souls are illuminated by the light within these copies and by the pattern that often arises effortlessly in them, then the soul thinks that she sees the truth and the eternal cause in the blessed idea that exists as a single unity. And then there's some missed words here, so it's going to sound funny, but it says each of, like that, all, and she, whole, and she and she, this is getting choppy here. I'm just going to skip ahead to the sojourn and the evidence for the repentance is with the souls, according to the power within them, they might stand. All right, I'm going to unpack that in a moment. But when I hear the word illuminated, like think Illuminati, right? But illumination, to bring light, to bring knowledge, to bring wisdom. I think of this as like a download, right? I'm being illuminated. Information is coming into my mind. Light is coming into my mind. To the next paragraph. And inferior souls are trained by Aeonic copies, which receive a replica of their souls while they are still in the world. After the individual emergence of the aeons, they come into being and are individually transferred from the copy of the sojourn to the truly existent sojourn, from the copy of the repentance to the truly existent repentance, and from the copy of the self-generated aeons to the truly existent self-generated aeons, and so on. The souls exist in a light, and then there's some skipped words here, them all through the aeonic copies. All right, that's a lot. I spent a lot of time going through this. Ultimately, let's go back here where it says, when the souls are illuminated by the light within these copies and by the pattern that often arises effortlessly in them, the soul thinks that she sees the truth and the eternal cause in the blessed idea that exists as a single unity. So basically, the soul thinks that it sees the truth when it's in an aeonic copy. The soul thinks that the Aeonic copy is reality. Now, if we look further ahead, inferior souls are trained by the Aeonic copies. What's that mean, trained? If you're in an Aeonic copy, number one, you don't know that it's a copy, right? Now let's look at Nick Bostrom's simulation argument, right? If a human, if a civilization reaches a level of technological advancement and they create ancestor simulations, The chances of us being in a simulation is greater than the chances of us being in base reality, is what the simulation argument states. So there's a good chance that we're living in a simulation, is what that talks, which is supported by actually some research out there, which I talk about in the book. This is talking about the same thing, just using spiritual language. Talking about other realities that are simulations, that are copies or simulations, right? Which we talked about earlier, um, of the actual reality. But it says here, inferior souls are trained by the Aeonic copies, which receive a replica of their souls while they are still in the world. So I'm going to sit here in base reality, but whoever's playing the Dennis Nappi II Sims game right clicks on my avatar and writes and highlights copy. And they drag that copy and they dump it into a duplicate world on the next hard drive, another reality. That's basically what this is saying. I'm using a metaphor here, right? But it's saying our souls can be copied, supported by Carla Turner's work in Masquerade of Angels, where she talked about someone's consciousness, the main character's consciousness, being placed in a tiny black box and then placed in a new cloned body, right? You're taking your consciousness out like digital software, putting it in hardware, and then transferring it somewhere else. It's the same thing. I'm in this reality. There's a copy of me made, and it's put in another reality. Would you know if you were placed in another reality? You may experience the deja vu phenomena, right? Where you might say, oh, this seems familiar. It's quite possible if you're feeling deja vu, it's because your memories are identical up until the point of when the copy was made. If you're the copy, though, the reality is you haven't actually existed before that moment the copy was made. Your memory exists a few moments before the copy was uploaded, and therefore you register it again because you're like, wow, I just went through, I did this before, and oh my gosh, I'm remembering it again. And now you go on in your own existence to have your own experience while base reality continues on this timeline. I know, sounds crazy, right? Talking about this stuff. So we've got these copies, they think they're the real thing. And let's see here, breaking this down a little bit further. What this sounds like to me is that we take this copy of our soul and we put it in this simulation reality. And the soul goes through a process of illumination, right? The text says here, inferior souls are trained by the Aeonic copies. What happens in training? You're learning something. You have to have some kind of an experience. So we're having the soul, the copy of the soul is having an experience in a particular Aeonic copy or in a particular reality. And then it's merged back with its original consciousness, with base reality. Now, does that not explain maybe why we have that sense of clear cognizance at times, that sense of knowing, that download feeling? Is it possible when we have that experience, that's really a piece of our consciousness being placed back with us? Look at it this way. I'm writing a book, right? I write my book and then I have to go somewhere and travel. So I put it on a flash drive. I take that flash drive and I stick it in another computer. My file comes up and I start writing that and the book expands. It has more knowledge, it has more information, it has more experience. The original book is still there, but I may have made some edits and changed it and enhanced it a little bit. I then take that off that computer onto the flash drive and I take it back to my laptop or my PC that's at home. I put the flash drive back in there. I open up that file, I click save as, and it overwrites the original one with the updated knowledge. The original story is still there, but now it is enhanced with the updated knowledge and the updated experience. Question I ask, is it possible that that's what they are talking about here in the Nag Hammadi? I mean, I think that's what's happening here. I'll be transparent there. And when I watched the movie, The Adam Project, and I started just really focusing on how older Adam and younger Adam are teaching each other these lessons. And then they're in a reality together that wasn't theirs. And in the end, they faded away because they achieved what they needed to achieve, which was beyond what the plot was showing us. And they resolved whatever problem, whatever conflict the storyline had. The bigger piece there that I think really was the core of this story, if you're paying attention, was each copy of the soul in that Aeonic copy learned what it needed to learn and then merged back with base reality, making it wiser. And in this story timeline, they were saying, like, this stuff's going to be erased and you're not going to remember these experiences, but parts of you will know. They were, I forget how they worded it. Parts of you will know. And that really spoke to me. And I think, and to expand on this further, do I think that the writers intended for that message to come through? Uh, Not in the lens that I'm explaining it. No. But I've talked quite a bit lately here and on the Future Forecast podcast about the similarities between remote viewing and writing or creativity in general. I've had multiple conversations with multiple intuitives and artists and creatives, and there is a similar process happening when you're being creative and when you're being, what's the word I'm looking for? And when you're gathering intuitive data. And two things just came to mind that happened to me recently that I need to share with you that's relevant to this. So just today, I'm working on the Hive Book 3. And in one section, I'm referring to the character's wife. And so to be fully transparent, I haven't touched I guess about a month ago, I sat down and I banged out like half a chapter and I was like, all right, that's it. And then I've been doing a lot of stuff. I haven't been able to write. I sat down tonight. I had a half hour to do some writing and I read that one paragraph without reading further. And I was like, I don't want to just refer to her as wife. It doesn't feel right to me. So I picked a name. And I was like, you know what? And I thought for a minute, I said, she feels like a Charlotte to me. Charlotte feels like the name that I need to put for this guy's wife. It was just a feeling I got. And then I kept reading my rough draft, like a few more paragraphs down, and I named his wife Charlotte. Now, maybe I'm just tapping into a memory, but I'm going to speak on the experience that I had. At the time when I made that correction, I had no conscious recollection that I had already named this guy's wife. I feel that at times when I'm writing, the story is already out there. It already exists, and I'm pulling it out. And I can support that further by there are times when I'm writing and I don't save it or something crashes and I lose chapters, I lose paragraphs, and then I have to go back and recreate it. And out of all the times it's happened, I have been able to recreate it, not because I remembered it. It's a feeling I'm feeling as I'm telling a story, much like when I'm remote viewing. There's a feeling, much like when I have that download that I'm trying to understand. If you listen to last month's podcast with the mashed potatoes, I'm trying to figure out what the shape means. Once I get it right, it's like a sigh of relief, right? It's just that satisfying feeling. That was my experience, that my brief experience with that name today. And then, but it surprised me when I got down a little bit further and I saw that I had already named her and used the same name. So there's an intuitive process that's happening here. I don't know if I'm getting away from my point or not here, but I highly recommend watching the Atom Project with this lens here of Aeonic copies and the thought of, where are we? What are we doing? And I guess this resonates with me so much because I've had a lot of experiences lately, I'd say over the last 6 months, that really make me question my reality. Now, if you've been listening to my show for the last 10 years, Dennis, you're always questioning reality. Yes, I am. Questioning my reality in the sense of what is my purpose here? Because I feel that there's a lesson to be learned, and I feel that at times the construct shows itself to me. Not in the sense that I look and I see the shimmer like in the Matrix or the code. It's in the way the universe reacts to me. Like I'm about to have an experience where I'm having a thought, and then synchronistically, something will come into that experience. A perfect example, I'm getting ready to do something, and the timing of someone randomly showing up or disturbing me or interrupting me, it's happened too many times for me to deny. And what really gets me is that is captured perfectly in Matrix 4. He's having a conversation with Trinity, and all of a sudden, her family shows up every time because the Matrix was trying to keep him on a certain path. And for everybody that was connected in the Matrix, or for the bots, the Matrix universe was sending them to interfere with the choices Neo was trying to make, or Thomas Anderson's trying to make as he's navigating and trying to uncover things. And I don't say that in the sense that I think there's this grand conspiracy of the universe to try to keep me trapped in a matrix reality. I do think that there are guides, guards, restrictions. I do think that there are things in place that can influence the people around us to interact in a certain way, to guide us or to deter us. Sometimes I feel it's our job to overcome that deterrence. But lately, the way that these things have been happening, it's getting harder for me to come up with a reason why synchronistically it keeps happening. I'm going to take it a step further. I was listening to Dolores Cannon talk about the backdrop people. I've talked about it on the show before. Let me see if I can find a clip of exactly what I'm talking about here. Okay. I want you to listen to Dolores Cannon talk about the backdrop people. I'm going to share my screen here. It's just a YouTube short, but I want you to listen to what she's saying, and then I want to talk about an experience that I just had last weekend with the backdrop people.
Tell us more about the backdrop people. Everything you see, everything that's around, everything in your life, you're creating. This is your movie. It wouldn't be a very good movie, would it, if you were the only person in the movie? You have the backdrop people. When you cast a movie, you cast all the extras to play all the parts of all the people. Those are the backdrop people. And when I go into a crowded airport now, I was thinking, oh boy, look at all the backdrop people I've just created. I shouldn't have put so many into this. The backdrop people are not real. They're not anything. They are energy. Now, the people in your life, those are real. Those are the ones that are on the evolutionary path. And you've made these contracts with all these other people, but these other ones are not. And I said, do they have souls? They said, no, they're just energy. They said it's holographic because this is how powerful your mind is. It's just an illusion. Everywhere I go now, they'll say, tell us more about the...
Okay. Sorry, that was eating up a lot of memory on my computer, but number one, that speaks a little bit to, if you've ever watched the movie Inception, how they have projections of their own subconscious. So what she's saying is that basically this reality exists for you. I can't get into it tonight because I'm not ready to talk about it. But this past week, I completed a blind remote viewing target and unexpectedly got data that speaks to this. Now, I'm not saying that to justify, like, this is real, remote viewing says. It could just be me processing things. But the rest of my session seems pretty spot on. But man, it was a heavy, I had some pretty good visuals and experiences, and like fully immersed in watching something that showed me a structure of reality that would fit this model that I'm talking about here. Fascinating. So Dolores Cannon's basically saying that, we're creating this reality for us. And when we need people to be in the area, our energy, our consciousness brings them into this. She says there are real souls, real consciousness, but then there's a lot of people who are just energy that we put there for the experience. It sounds weird. It sounds crazy, right? I did an experiment over the weekend, and first I was shopping at IKEA, and I'm looking around, and it was packed. I'm looking at all these people, and something I like to do from time to time when I'm in a crowded place, and if I'm not having an anxiety attack, like I'm a big people watcher, but I just look at people, and I'm in total awe and amazement when I really look at somebody, and I say to myself, they have a life. They have this whole life that is rich and full of experiences. And there may be 1,000 people that I'm looking at in a particular area. I mean, IKEA was very crowded. So let's say there was 1,000 people there. Let's say there was 500 people there. Each one of them has their own lives. Each one of them has their own relationships and their own experiences. Each one of them has their own inner worlds. And when I look at that and I try to imagine what that's like and experience that and connect with all the people around me, it's a fascinating thing to think about how complex my life is, my world is. And that happens for people that I know nothing about, that I will never know anything about. However, also thinking I could walk up to one of those people and I could develop a relationship with them, and then my world would intertwine with their world. Yet at the same time, according to Dolores Cannon, most of those people in the background are backfill. So what if I went up to one of these NPCs, these non-player characters, and tried to engage with them? What would happen? Would then my subconscious create this whole fictitious line of characters that don't really exist? We're going down a rabbit hole here, right? But if we're living in Aeonic copies and we have to learn something, maybe that's what's happening. Anyway, here's my point. I'm having that thought experiment going on. And I said, okay, you know what? If I'm really creating this reality, before I leave IKEA today, I want to see an old man with a walking stick. Now, in my mind, I was picturing Gandalf the Grey from Lord of the Rings, right? An old man, long white beard, with a big old wooden walking stick. But I said to myself, just a man with a beard and a cane. If you look at remote viewing, break it down to its basic gestalts, right? And I figured I'll probably see them by the time I'm done here. If I'm living in a situation that's similar to what Dolores Cannon describes as the backdrop people. I get to line, and wouldn't you know it, not one, but two men with white beards and walking sticks walked right in front of me. Now, one of them was driving a scooter, the other one was walking, but they both had canes. They both had beards. It wasn't what I had exactly visualized, but I had to ask myself, is that the universe? Number one, is that the universe acknowledging my request, saying, yes, you are onto something, Dennis? Number two, is that not the case? Did I just have a telepathic moment and foresee the future? Hey, I'm going to see that. That's possible as well. Number three, is it just a coincidence? Because chances are, if you say, I want to see an old man with a cane and you're in a public place, at some point over the course of a few hours, you're going to see an old man with a cane, right? Here's the kicker. My father-in-law is in his 70s. He's doing work on our house. He's helping us, work on some things. The very next morning, he came up as I'm getting ready for work. He arrives and he says, I've got something for you, Dennis. And he pulls out a wooden, highly polished oak staff, taller than me, very similar to the staff that Gandalf carried in Lord of the Rings. He said, I was doing a job. Someone was getting rid of it. They gave it to me, and I thought of you. That's taking things a step further. What are the chances that I'm going to say, this is the sign I need? And then the next day, my father-in-law randomly brings me this giant walking stick that was part of the criteria that I was looking for in my mind. Was that the reassurance because I started having the doubt, all the what if stuff I said. Well, what if I had a telepathic event? What if I was bound to see old men with sticks anyway? Like to me, that is another indicator of like, hey, there's something else going on here. So what does it mean? Are the backdrop people real? I don't know. I think my thinking was more along the lines of like, how much control do I have over this reality? Does that mean I can sit here and say I want a pile of cash? No, that's not what I was getting at. It was more in looking at the characters that appear in my world and my ability to call them into this system that I'm in, this reality that I'm in. It leaves me with so many questions in terms of, what's the purpose? Am I in a copy right now? Because let's face it, if you're listening to this and I don't know, thinking about the way that this works, if you're in my reality with me, is this a shared reality or is this my world and you're a projection of me? Or are you just tapping into my reality to gather information that you need? Then you're going to go back to your reality. Like we're in a shared space, and then you go back to your own world. I don't know. They're going forever about this. But things have been really weird over the last, I don't know, few years, right? Ever since, I mean, we can go back before COVID, but as I said a few moments ago, sometimes I feel that things happen in a way that's almost the universe or this system or this Aeonic copy revealing itself to me. So I'm trying to figure out, what am I supposed to learn? What happens if I learn it? Does that mean that this reality is going to collapse? If it does, chances are this version of me will never know it. I'll never know it. But the experience that I'm gaining, the knowledge that I'm gaining, gets merged back with my base reality consciousness, and he moves on. Now, it sounds crazy, right? We're talking about all these different dimensions. Going back through my old interview with Phil Corso Jr. His father was Colonel Corso, wrote the book The Day After Roswell. It's a great interview. I'll have it linked. It's up, in all the places where you can find my podcast. It's a very popular interview. One of the things he told me towards the end of the interview was that one of the things he can't talk too much about is time travel. I'm not going to get into playing that exact portion of it. I lost my spot. I'm not going to get into playing that exact portion of it, but I do want to play a comment that he shared with me in that discussion that's very relevant to what I'm talking about in terms of um, copies of reality or different dimensions and tying it into the Atom Project with past, present, future timelines. Okay, let's take a listen to Phil Corso Jr.
I'm sorry, go ahead. What more people get confused if you come back from the future, you are then coming from another dimension, space-time.
Yeah.
So you're coming from another dimension. So it's both in one. In other words, yes, it's the future. Yes, it's another dimension.
Makes sense.
There are theoretically 11 dimensions. My father said the fifth dimension is the most interesting one there is.
Okay. Wonderful interview with Phil Corso Jr. The future is another dimension. It's the future, it's another dimension. We talk about things like the Mandela effect. We talk about things in the remote viewing community about remote influencing. Can I influence myself in the future? Can I go back and influence myself in the past? What happens if I do that? Do I change my current timeline or do I create a new timeline that goes off and has a whole bunch of different experiences because I made that one change and it creates this splitting effect? I'm not well educated enough to figure that out at this point in my existence. But I think we're onto something with understanding time and reality. I think there's a lot more going on here than we realize. Edward, in a conversation I had with him years ago, mentioned something about the Time Lords will not let you mess with time. I wonder if this is part of our growth and evolution. as we're learning to navigate our own mind and our own consciousness. And if our purpose here is truly one of learning and experience, and we have this ability to create experiences through other worlds, other realms, much like I'm going to put this VR headset on. If we can do that through consciousness, I wonder if that's something similar to what's happening here. And do we have those moments, like in the Atom Project, where we go on this adventure or we go have this experience? We learn, we grow, we change, and then we dissolve away. But the knowledge of that experience is absorbed into our base reality consciousness, and it has learned the lesson that it has needed to learn, so it can then continue on and do what it needs to do. Think about that. Think about that aspect of learning and how much you could learn in a single moment. I mean, it's that moment where Neo's like, his eyes roll in the back of his head and he's getting these downloads because they're plugging stuff in. I mean, time's not really a factor at that point. If my soul can go out, make a copy of itself, and go have this entire experience in another universe, and then be copied and then quickly uploaded to me, that could be in base reality, that could be a span of moments, seconds. But it could have taken me weeks, months, decades to learn in that copied reality. You could drive yourself crazy thinking about this. So I have more questions than answers, I think, and I'm not saying at all that any of this is absolutely the way that it is. I want to be clear about that. This is me trying to process a thought that was inspired from a movie. But I think as a creative person in works of fiction, we're trying to understand universal truths. And it's like an AOL, right? The basic gestalts are there. We just have to understand what it's trying to say because it's not direct. It's not directly explained. I think we're trying to understand something. I know this was a lot. At least for me, it was a lot. It's tiring on my brain. I would love to know your thoughts. What is our reality? What influence and control do we have over that reality? Am I close? Am I way off? Do we have no idea? I don't know. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. So thank you for entertaining my dialogue this evening. I look forward to hearing from all of you. Again, if you're interested, Reiki 1 via Zoom, live Zoom courses starts October 1st. Check it out, sixthsensemedia.net/Reiki. Get yourself a copy of I Am Human, Food for the Archons, where I do a lot of deep dives into everything I just talked about in the book. Get yourself a journal, whether it's one of mine or whether it's one of your own, something you pick up from the dollar store. Start writing, start recording your experiences, start recording your thoughts. Continue to dissect this reality, and let's figure this thing out. All right, friends. I'm Dennis Nappi II. Remember to keep an open mind, never stop questioning, and let your intuition be your guide. Thank you.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup. It becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend. Be water, my friend. Be water, my friend, my friend. be water, my friend, my friend, my friend.